Good afternoon, and welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. With over 60 years of experience as an investment banker, entrepreneur, investment analyst, economist, and venture capitalist, Morty Davis is Wall Street and capitalism personified. The over 400 companies for which he has raised more than $3 billion over the years have created a countless number of jobs and exciting new products. Through the Voice of Wisdom, Mr. Davis explores, analyzes, and debates the most topical political, economic, and social issues facing our world today. Joining Mr. Davis today is Ruki Renov, author of two amazing books on relationships, dating, and marriage. To join the conversation, please call 332-263-3300. That's 332-263-3300. And now, Mr. Davis and Ms. Renov.
Hello again. I'm delighted to be back with my cherished listeners who have proven surprisingly so to be true voices of wisdom. They've challenged me brilliantly, and they've agreed with me brilliantly, and their wisdom and their knowledge and their articulation. I couldn't be more pleased with the quality of my listeners. I hope they're at least as impressed with my own, but I'm so impressed with their wisdom and knowledge.
I'm impressed.
Yeah, and tonight I'm lucky to be joined to have a family reunion because my daughter Ruki right here is who's written two great books. Let me show them to you. One is on my left is the book, The Art of the Date, how to find your lifelong soulmate, how to judge them, how to work with them towards your marriage, and then make sure, as my father-in-law said, real love comes after the marriage. When you share the joy of having offspring, kids, and dealing with the problems, and having somebody that supports you and also that makes you smarter because they help you, they challenge you. You get everything in one package. When you get a soulmate, you get the people that are going to be your partner in life and doing all the things together to make for a happier existence and a more rewarding existence, and solving problems together, the challenges of life. So tonight we're joined with these two brilliant young ladies. My daughter Ruki right next to me, and the one who's handling the call-in as a producer now with me, my daughter Leah. So I'm delighted to have you join the family reunion.
And we wish my mother, who is the real voice of wisdom, were here doing this. She made this a fun show.
That's true. Years ago, I did a radio show. I started doing it on my own called Morty Davis, the Voice of Wisdom. And each week she came along with me and brought me coffee while I was doing my talk show. And
she looked up all the information.
yeah, she supported me with all the information I had at my hand. I was so lucky in life that I had such a. She passed away just about a year and a month ago. So after a while, she said to me, "Why should I just be your valet, your slave, bringing you with coffee, handling everything? I'm going to speak up." And she started to speak up, and I hardly ever got a word in edgewise after that.
It was a great show. If my father said white, she said black, and if he switched to black, she said white.
Yeah, I didn't need anybody to call in and debate me. She was the one. But anyway, she turned out. Then I said, "Morty Davis, the voice of wisdom, and my wife, Rosie, the real voice of wisdom. So, again, I'm happy that you, my cherished listeners, join me again this Wednesday evening, every Wednesday evening at 6:30, and we can explore the subject of these books.
My father's an expert on marriage. He was married over 70 years. He could tell you his policy. It's based on the Ten Commandments. Go ahead, tell them, how you taught us to live.
Oh, yeah. The Ten Commandments, I figured if it's good enough for God, it's good enough for me. So the Ten Commandments, I'm sure most of, or all of you know, are made up of two sides, two tablets. On the one side is all the things you should do. You should have only one God. You should honor your father and your mother. All the things that are right in life. On the other side, God advises you and informs you of the things you shouldn't do. It's actually a guide to how to live. The things you should do and the things you shouldn't do. So on that side is, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, all the things that make for a more enjoyable and balanced life. So I told my four daughters, if you want to know what to do, just listen and watch your mother, Rosie. She epitomizes the perfect behavior. And if you want to know what not to do, because kids always have to rebel anyway to grow up, most of them, it's a need. The king is dead, long live the king. So if you want to know what not to do, just watch me. And they turned out so good by following those instructions. I can't believe they're so terrific.
And basically that's how we did our marriages also. We saw how my father acted and how my mother acted. We followed, we picked husbands, although they're a lot like my father in a lot of ways. But we followed my mother as much as we could.
It's unbelievable. The only thing I feel bad about in my whole relationship, dating and marriage and so forth, is the way the world has developed in the United States these days, is people don't get married till they have their kids and they're 2, 3, 4, 5 years old. And then they invite the kids to the wedding. My kids never had the opportunity to attend the most meaningful, most lovable event in my life and my wife's life. They didn't attend our
We're
wedding.
We're okay with it.
No, but other kids say, remember mommy's and daddy's wedding? Oh, yeah, of course. You were the page boy. I was a flower girl. They attended the most meaningful and enjoyable event of our lives, of my wife and our lives.
But meanwhile, you had a great marriage, and we're here to discuss why marriages aren't working or why they are working, but why people are having problems these days.
Yeah, and why do they teach everything in school that's irrelevant? They teach you algebra, advanced geometry, all kind of subjects that most of us never have a use of or employ during our lives. And mostly after we take the final exam in those subjects, we never, ever make use of those. But the things that are vital to everyday life, to a good marriage, to working well at a good job, to having friends and relationships, they don't teach any of that. And we should. We should teach the things that matter. And so, if you want to have a good friend, there are ways to behave. If you want to have a good wife or a good soulmate, there are ways to behave. one of the rabbis taught me. I said, how do you suggest that I have a good marriage, or that we have a good marriage? And he said, well, the first thing, Morty, every morning when you get up, the first thing you say to your wife is, sweetheart, I'm sorry. You don't have to say anything more. She'll figure out enough things that you should be sorry for.
And you had enough to be sorry.
Right. Thank you.
Listening, Camelot, the advice, he says, how do I have a good marriage? And the advice is love her, just love her, And that's really, the problem is that people today are unprepared to care about the other person. They don't want to commit. They don't respect the other one. They don't want to sacrifice for the other one. It's all about me. It's a very me generation. It's a very disposable generation. You're not happy. It's over. People are getting divorced like within the first week of marriage now. They don't even give it a chance. And therapists say that, if you look for a problem, you can find within the first week, it's easy to find 10 problems that you decide you can't live with. And then either you decide to work with it and you decide to commit and you decide that this is what's important, or you walk out. And unfortunately, so many people are just walking out.
Yeah, Ruki, she says it right, because I know so many people. I had a great friend who I played tennis with, and one time he told me his daughter was getting married, and he was making a wedding at the Plaza Hotel, and all the people that attended, we all had different wines at every course, different champagnes. We had what's that black thing called?
Caviar.
Caviar. It was one of the most expensive weddings I've ever been at. And he told me how lucky his daughter was and how proud he was and how much he thought of their son-in-law, who was a doctor. And I really congratulated him, and I thought he was very lucky, and his daughter was very lucky. And then about 7-8 months later, I asked him, how the young couple doing? And he says, oh, the guy turned out to be such a bad guy, such a bum. They're getting divorced, and he's nasty, and he's crude and rude. And so, before you get married, everybody's on their best behavior. You don't see neither one shows any negative side if they have any, and they're so nice. And after marriage, they've in some cases, unfortunately, they turn out to be very different than during the what's the period called? Not the engagement period. The what?
Honeymoon.
The honeymoon period. But even before
No,
the honeymoon.
during the engagement period, they act like they're perfect. I have a good friend. She was so excited about getting married. The guy gave her a car, Marcy. The guy gave her a car and gave her everything she could think of and bought her jewelry. And she had the most beautiful wedding. And the next day, he took away the keys to her car. He took away all her jewelry. She was in shock. And she got divorced within a few days. And I was trying to set her up. I was showing her beautiful wedding picture to people. Look how gorgeous she looked at her wedding last week. Do you want to go out with her? It was insane. It was like, but people put their best foot forward. And
yeah, as my father-in-law said, the real love comes after marriage. After you have challenges, after you help each other, support each other, have children together that you love, and try to bring up as best you can together. And before marriage, a lot of people get married and think they're so in love because their hormones are at the highest level ever, and they try to see the best in each other, and they're sort of hot to trot. But that doesn't mean you're really in love.
Also, people
It's kind
want
of a
so much.
love. It's movie in love, movie kind of love. But so that's urgent. Look, when I was in college and throughout my educational career, they taught me things that I found interesting, but I haven't used. I took a lot of history, geology, archaeology, things that were, interesting and maybe worth learning about and add to your total joy in life, possibly. But they didn't teach any of us how to handle a budget for a family, how to run a household, how to reconcile when you disagree. All
Look,
the things.
you need a license to drive. You need licenses for everything. And to go get married and to bring children, you don't need any, there's no requirements.
Right.
There's no courses. Everybody goes into it blindly. Like,
To bring a
then you
baby
stumble around.
into this world and not have any experience or any guidance, or you learn by going, by doing it, and that's you should have some training. You need the minimum training to do anything in life. To give, like as you pointed out, to give haircuts, to give manicures, to be a masseuse or
Also,
masseur.
people need to learn reality. They need to know what to expect. They need to know that you do fight and you do argue in marriage. My husband and I, we hardly ever argue, and certainly not in front of the kids. And when my daughter got married, the first argument she had with her husband, she thought this must be over. And she said to me, "Ma, you did us a disservice. We didn't know you're supposed, you can argue and it could still be a fabulous marriage." And it's true, you have to, people go into it very demanding, wanting a lot, thinking they can have everything. Very unrealistic. I heard a story that said, this guy says, I want the type of girl who I can hand a whole bunch of buttons and tell her, here, take these buttons and sew me some shirts, which is exactly the feeling. These guys want it all. They want everything. They don't look what a person really is and what a person's capable of. They find somebody, they want them to work, they want them to keep house, they want them to have kids, they demand a lot. And the same for the girls. They want husbands who make a fortune. Even before they finish school, they say, "What do you mean you're not working?" "Well, I have to finish school." They have to be realistic about their expectations going in, so they aren't disappointed and aren't frustrated.
Yeah, and it's said that it's after the marriage you get counseling on how to get along. How to you come to a counselor and say, we had this fight and now she won't talk to me, I won't talk to her. It's like one gentleman comes to the rabbi and says, "Rabbi, I think my wife is trying to poison me." The rabbi says, "Really?" Yes. He says, "I'm pretty sure, my wife's trying to poison me." He says, "Don't worry. I'll talk to your wife during this coming week, and come back in a week, and I'll give you further advice." So, sure enough, he comes back in a week, and he says to the rabbi, "Well, what's the conclusion? What's the advice you want to give me, that you should give me, you propose?" So he says, "Look, I spoke to your wife 4 hours on Monday, 5 hours on Tuesday, 6 hours on Wednesday, and 7 hours on Thursday. And my advice to you is take the poison." So it's good to get counseling.
Well, they say there's 2 times that men don't understand women: before marriage and after marriage. Oh,
So that's pretty good. What about in between?
no in between. They're in and out of it. unfortunately. But there are things that people have to learn. Certainly have to learn to compromise. I understand that our producer here had some interesting stories of compromise in his marriage. Len,
Yeah,
could you tell us?
Len Katz, who's my chief executive in business and a fabulous guy, and he has a wonderful relationship with his wife and his kids. Could you tell us about what worked for you, Len?
Sure. A lot of people ask me that. What is the secret to a successful marriage? I tell them very simply, it's compromise. So what is that? Well, for example, a few years ago, my wife wanted to get a dog. So I said, a dog? I mean, we don't need a dog. They're messy, they smell, they pee on the rug. Why do we need to get a dog? So we compromised. We got a dog.
Yeah, makes
Then
sense.
she said, well, I think we should get a new car. I said, a new car? Your car's not that old. It's low miles, no dents, it runs great. What do we need a new car for? So we compromised. We got a new car. Then she said, I think we need some window treatments. I said, window treatments? A new couch. I said, we don't need a couch. It's fine. It's not dirty. It's not ripped. It works fine. It's comfortable. What do we need a new couch for? So we compromised. We got a new couch.
That's
So
it.
that's compromise.
Yeah.
Compromise. Now, you're supposed to divide up the decisions. Which decisions were you in charge of, Daddy?
Yeah, my success for marriage was due to the fact that before we got married, we decided as to who should make what decisions. So my wife said, "Look, I'll make the the minor decisions. Where should we send our kids to school? What neighborhood should we live in? What restaurants should we go out to? What destinations should we pursue? Go to on our vacations? All the little decisions. How do we spend our money wisely? That was all hers. She said, you could have the major decisions. Should we go to war with Japan? Should we invade Iraq? So it was never a problem because she never disagreed. Whatever I said about that, she said, I'm okay with that. and I agreed going in.
And the world is running okay because of you, because of those decisions.
Yeah, it was a happy marriage. For me, for my wife, not so happy.
Hall of Fame marriage.
Anyway, I always told her we have a Hall of Fame marriage. Because for me, it's sensational. For you, not so hot. But 1 out of 2, it's 500. We're batting 500. In baseball, if you get 3 hits out of 10, if you're on the team and you get 3 hits out of 10 during your career, you go to the Hall of Fame if you bat 300. And here I said, we're batting 500, so we have a Hall of Fame marriage. So you too can have a Hall of Fame marriage as long as you outline what and which ones you're in charge of and which ones your wife is in charge of.
That's good.
But there are so many basic things, that they don't teach in school. How to get along in life, how to respond when you're in a job and you don't love your boss, or you don't get along with a coworker, or
even learning how to speak to one another.
Yeah, how to speak to one another, and also when you decide that you absolutely should quit or must quit, or how you fight your way through all the negatives in life. The more you go for the top of the world, have dreams, pursue those dreams, and the more you do, you'll have more failures. As I pointed out several times in the past. What's the biggest mistake young daters make? Somebody's called in and said to you, Ruki, what's the biggest mistake young daters make?
What's the biggest mistake they make? They
Not
don't.
breaking off right away.
What? That's good. Okay, I'll ask you a question. If you have a dog barking at your back door and your wife barking at the front door, who do you let in?
Who do you let in?
Yeah. It's up to you, but if you let the dog in, he'll stop barking.
Yeah. Little things, you start off with little disagreements, and the biggest
No, they
explosive.
grow.
Yeah.
They,
Oh, we
they
have a caller, Debbie. Debbie, welcome to the Voice of Wisdom. Let's hear your whether you agree or disagree with anything we said. We love to hear from you. Debbie?
Hi. Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we hear you.
So, I noticed that there are certain red flags from people that I noticed. So I wanted to know if you had any other red flags that you've noticed. One I've noticed in a few of my friends. They told me before they got married that this man or woman, a girl, a guy is very, very difficult, but they're worth it. And all three of the people who told me that got divorced subsequently. So I think that's a red flag. I think someone who treats the person they're dating good, but doesn't treat other people good, like the simple people, the waiter or the, I don't know, somebody else, or their own parents or their siblings. You have to really watch that. I was wondering, so if you have any other red flags you would tell people to look out for. And my other comment was that I think people these days ask a lot of questions about the potential person they are choosing to either go out with or not. And they ask a lot of very, I think, silly questions that are very external to the person. You know, sometimes what do they do for a living? That's not as external, but how they dress, things like that, what they watch on TV, whether they watch TV. I think, you know, more appropriate questions are, you know, do they have a temper? Are they a team player? Are they selfish? Are they easygoing? So I wanted on both hands for you to comment on red flags and to comment on what you think are important questions.
Well, one of the biggest issues in marriage today is a husband and wife, I notice, fight over the remote. The remote. So if you're fortunate enough, as I was, to make it somewhat big, we solved that by getting two remotes in different and two different TVs in different rooms. So we never fight anymore about the remote. But you got to find resolutions to the differences you have. So that's only one. That's only one minuscule disagreement. But there's so many others that you have to resolve, and you have to find a way to resolve it so that at the end you still might have disagreements about the issue you're talking about, but you still love each other and understand each other, and maybe you work on what you want her to change, and she works on what she'd like you to change. But, you know, there was a brilliant lawyer, rabbi friend of ours, Harari is his name. He lectures all over. Charlie Harari. He lectures throughout the world. He's really funny and brilliant and so great to listen to. And he had a weekly show on, and it was one time a woman called up and said she was married about 5 or 6 years, and she loved her husband when she got married. He was so good looking and so sweet and so handsome. And soon after they got married, he started to be nasty, abusive, in terms of not necessarily abusive hitting her, but that came too. But he just put her down, and so this Charlie Harari, this rabbi, asked her, well, why didn't you get up and leave if he was abusive and he was nasty? She said, well, I didn't know what I would do if I left. And I didn't want to go back to my parents and they see what a failure I am. So I stayed with him. And then every time I was ready to leave, because it was so impossible to take, he swore to me, this time he's never going to do it again. He's going to change. He never changed. And by this time they had 3 kids, and it was almost impossible to break up. So Charlie Harari said, whenever that happens, the sooner you end that, the sooner you find a resolution, the happier your life will be, because you can't change people of that nature. And it's funny in life that people divorce a guy who abuses them, and then they wind up somehow marrying another guy that abuses them. Or they would break off with a guy who's an alcoholic, and the next thing you know, they're involved with a marriage with another alcoholic. So you gotta be careful going in who you make a lifetime commitment with and to. And if you're wrong, the sooner you try to correct it, hopefully even before you have children, so they're not stuck in the middle. Go ahead.
Unfortunately, people are, the ones who want to get married unfortunately are in a rush to get married, and they overlook a lot of red flags, like you say. If you see a couple where the guy or the girl talks down to the other one, walk away. If you see that the family, they don't respect each other, or if you see that there are people within the family who are not talking to each other, find out the circumstances. There's usually something wrong there. You have to watch how people treat their parents, how they treat their siblings. I had someone that we were involved with. She was fabulous before the wedding. The second the wedding was over, like her whole personality switched. Her sister got up to speak, and she said, "How dare she steal my spotlight?" And I was in shock. And after that, everything that came out of her mouth was on a whole different degree. You have to really listen and read into what you hear, and you can't ignore it, which we all seem to do. I do it very often, because we want to like people, and we want to get married, and we want it to work. So we put up with it. And it's the same thing once you're in a marriage. If the person you're married to is putting you down, or belittling you, or not hearing you, or not giving you the love and the attention you need, then something's wrong. Then you have to speak up. You have to be given your space, and you have to have boundaries. On the other hand, you have to be able to tell a person, this is what's bothering me. You have to be able to form a relationship. In the end, speaking to each other is the most important thing, and they find that not just communication, but knowing that the other person has your back, that whatever happens, they're not busy judging you, they're busy looking to help you and to be on your team. It's us, it's a couple against everyone else, not the other way around. Also, if somebody walks in right away to your family and starts criticizing your family and your friends, something's wrong, and you have to take notice. As far as your other question, where you were saying that where people are always I'm sorry, they're forgiving. Wait, what were you saying is the second thing you wanted to say? I'm sorry. Debbie, could you repeat it? What was she asking?
Yes, the positive questions people should ask.
Oh, yes.
Instead of the silly questions.
So it's the same thing. You're right. They do ask. They ask what color tablecloths people use and what kind of crystal people use, and how wealthy they are. Who cares? That's the answer. Those aren't the things that matter. The character is what matters. The family is what matters. How a person is brought up is what matters. A person's dreams and goals matter. The other things, whether they're funny, whether they're, you want to know if they're going to embarrass you, but you don't want to know so many things you think are what you're looking for aren't what you're looking for. The things you think are perfect for you, you think somebody outgoing is perfect, then you find that he's outgoing and never paying attention to you. Your people's positives become their negatives. You have to watch for that. You want positives that are going to stay positive. You want things like a good-natured person who's going to not be good to everybody else but is going to be good to you and to your family and to your children. So you have to get to know a person. You have to find out about a person if possible. But the most important thing is you have to go by your instincts, and the way to follow your instincts is by getting to know a person well and seeing them in many different situations.
The only thing I disagree with
I knew
in
you
all that
disagree.
you said,
Yeah.
as you said, you got to talk to each other. The only time I ever got in trouble was when I was talking to when I don't talk to her, I never got in trouble. But I always got in trouble when I opened my mouth. So the best thing to do is try to be a good listener and be quiet.
No, although they say if you don't talk to each other, you don't have a relationship. So you have to talk, but you have to watch what you
You may
say
not
and
have
how
a
you say
relationship,
it.
but you're not at war.
You're not in trouble.
Once I open my mouth. But I'll give you a good example. Leah, who's handling the phones tonight, fell in love with a guy who was so good looking. He was so charming. His family was from Morocco,
Right.
and they became so close. She was thinking of getting married to him, and he was very excited about her, and said, "Let's get engaged." And she said, "Well, before we get engaged, I'd like to visit your family because I never met any members of your family." So she went with him to visit his family in Morocco. She was there a week, and when she came back, she said she just can't marry him. As good looking as he is, as bright as he seems to be, because the wife, his mother, was treated like
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
I think you're about to lose your screener. You might want to curtail your story there.
my screener.
The person who's running your phones.
Me.
Oh.
Don't tell too much.
Meaning,
See, when he opens his mouth, he gets in trouble.
Yeah, she doesn't like me telling the story.
Right, that's it.
But that shows you, it wasn't like the wife was married to a soulmate. It was as if she was married to a dictator. She liked it in that part of the world. That seems to be prevalent, even overwhelmingly true. So she broke off, and thank God she didn't marry that young man. So
She married a great guy. That's what counts.
she married a great guy and has wonderful kids. And
Right.
well, my daughters have great marriages, terrific marriages. But when you break up, it's better to break up before you have kids, because divorce is very hard on the kids. I'll tell you an interesting story. A couple comes to the judge to get a divorce, and he looks at them, and he says to the husband, "How old are you?" He says, 95. He says to the wife, how old are you? She says, 92. He says, "How long you married?" They said, 72 years. 72 years, and now you want a divorce? No, we wanted a divorce a long time ago. So why didn't you get a divorce a long time ago? Well, we felt we had to wait. We had to wait till the kids grew up and died, because they didn't want to. They didn't want to subject their kids to divorce. So if you wait till you're 95 and 93, then you could. I think your kids, if they're still around, could handle it.
Right. But it's important to talk to your spouse and to say what's on your mind and to have that relationship. They said Bill Doherty, he wrote a book called Take Back Your Marriage. He said that couples with children who have 15 minutes of uninterrupted, non-logistical, non-problem solving conversation every day is in the top 5%. Could you imagine that? That most people don't talk to each other like that even 12 minutes a day. Most couples. They just walk past each other down the steps.
Well,
They don't-
that's why the marriages sometimes last. Because the minute they start talking to each other, they get into a war. And
Right. The first thing they say after that is, that joke about the not the nuns. What are they? What are those guys? Oh gosh, in a monastery. So
the monks.
the monks, right? So the monks, there's a guy, he becomes a monk and he goes into a monastery, and the head monk says to him, you can only say 3 words a year, and he's so unhappy. And the first year, after a year, they call him in and he says, bed too hard.
The bed's too hard.
Bed too hard. He's only allowed 3 words. And then the next year, he waits a year, they call him in, he says, food not good. Okay. Waits another year, he said, the roof falling in. Okay.
The roof,
Not
the
every-
roof falling in.
Roof falling in. And a whole year goes by. He goes back and he says to the head guy, he says, I am leaving. He says, I knew you would leave. All you do since you got here is complain, complain, complain. It's the same thing. If you have a marriage like that, the first thing a person finally says when they open their mouth is, I'm out of here. Because people want a relationship. They go into marriage to have a friend. And if they're not having who to speak to, you have to learn to get up, say good morning. Mom used to say, sometimes, every morning I get up. Sometimes I wake up, I wake up grouchy. Sometimes I let him sleep. That's it.
What was the title of her book?
Living, loving, and laughing, and other things I do before breakfast.
You know why she was living, loving, and laughing, and other things she did before breakfast?
Why?
Because after breakfast, I got up. There was no more living, loving, and laughing. But it's a great book, fabulous book.
Yeah.
One of the best books I ever wrote.
Yeah, it's a great book. But there are things that people
I had
can.
another question.
Go ahead.
I'd like you, if you can, to discuss the difference between what men and women need in marriage. I heard women need more appreciation, men need more respect. I was wondering what your thoughts, and if you knew of other things that are differences between men and women in marriage in general.
Well, everybody needs an understanding soulmate, had to have tolerance when it seems like they're adversarial to what you believe. So it's like any other part of life. It's to work on problem solving. As a matter of fact, this seems to be a family interest or a family compulsion even, because Ruki wrote this book, The Art of Marriage. That's after the dating. If you finally got married to a soulmate that you think is great. So you have to work, if there's a problem, work it through, work it out, do whatever each one of you could do to consolidate your relationship and stop staying at belligerent activities and behavior towards each other. So I say, Ruki wrote the book, The Art of the Marriage, and also my daughter's arranged for at least 60 different couples to introduce them to each other, and they're married. I don't know if any of them will ever forgive my daughters, but really, But really, these couples are always coming and thanking my daughters for making. So in addition to Ruki, who's here, who wrote The Art of Marriage and all the behaviors that you should pursue, that of course we couldn't cover even a fraction of what's in our book. I have one daughter that does marriage counseling, and I have one granddaughter that does marriage counseling. And they work to bring families, husband and wives, in many cases, miraculously back together again. And in some instances, I think they advise them to move on and get divorced and get a new relationship. So depending on what the circumstances are, there's all kind of different advice. One time you could tell the husband, drink the poison. Another time you tell him, I spoke to your wife and here's what's bothering her. And if you would address that aggressively and diligently, you'll be able to save your marriage. So, but in school in general, from first grade on, they should start teaching the things that you have to know in life and that you will use in life instead of trigonometry and all these sciences. A lot of my friends took chemistry; they never used even one bit. They know all the different scientific terms for things, but they never use it. It's like, and it's good to have, and the more knowledge you have, it's wonderful. But the formative years, your early years, you should get that kind of training. All these other things, after you're grown up and you have time, you can go to night school or you could take online courses, and you can learn all the things that add quality to your life, about art, about, I took a course in art appreciation, and it was useful, and I enjoy things that I never would have enjoyed absent that course. But it's certainly not up there, not as crucial, and that you could develop later in life too. It's not as crucial as learning just the basic things: how to be nice to others, how to avoid conflict, how to resolve conflict. These are the things that matter. How to pick a job. People take a job and then they feel stuck in the job and they're miserable all their lives. I know a guy, his father-in-law took care of him, his father-in-law had 4 daughters too, like me, and he used his wealth. He hired all the 4 son-in-laws, and one son-in-law that I went to school with early in life, he once came to me and said, he'd like to get me to buy some company and he'll head it up for me and so forth. I didn't find that purchase compelling, so I didn't do it. But he suffered from ulcers because the father-in-law used that power through the daughters to control the son-in-laws totally. They couldn't express their creativity, their entrepreneurship, nothing, So he died at a young age, unfortunately, from the ulcers that got further agitated and killed him. So you have to learn.
Can I ask another
Can
question?
can I just give some helpful advice to people before we finish? I wanted to say that in marriage, the positives have to outweigh the negatives. The way you think about the person you're married to, it has to outweigh 5 to 1. So if you think of something that bothers you about a person, try to think of 5 ways that that person makes you happy. The goal of marriage is not to think alike, but to think together. And it's not how compatible you are, but how you deal with your incompatibility. And people can live with 10 areas of incompatibility or disagreement as long as they agree to disagree, as long as they accept one another, as long as they're aware of each other's sensitivities. we all have sensitivities. It's called some that we refer to as our sunburn. Like you don't, very often you don't see it, but it's there. And a husband or a wife should be aware of and recognize the other person's sensitivities. And you should go with the attitude, who is right, it doesn't matter. Who cares who is right, okay? Then there are little hints like criticizing a person's action, not the person himself. Like say, instead of saying, you did this wrong, say, I don't enjoy when somebody does something like this. Always say, I love you. I know there's a story, a woman says to her husband, you haven't told me you loved me since we got married. And the husband says, you know what? I told you I loved you when we got married. If things change, I'll let you know. Women have to hear it. Men also have to hear it. You're right. Men want respect. Women also need respect. Men want to be complimented on their work. Women need a little more tenderness. But you have to create a secure connection. And there are ways that you can learn to do this. You don't criticize a person outright. Certainly you don't do a global criticism. You can say to a person that you forgot to pick me up, but don't say, I can never depend on you, you never pick me up. You can use something like I rather than you. Instead of say, I think we should work on this, do a we. Don't say, you let me down. Say, I feel let down. So it doesn't place the blame on a person. And say, rather, say something like, and rather than but. Like say, you're a wonderful person, but you always mess up. That negates everything. Say, you're a wonderful person, and I wish you wouldn't do so and so. That makes it, it evens it out. It makes it a little more tolerable. Switch all your negatives to positives. Don't say, don't talk while I'm talking. Say, I would feel better if while I'm talking, no one else spoke. And then remember that timing is important. If somebody is already down, don't knock them down further. If somebody's in a bad mood, just wait. And, speak kindly, speak politely, try not to criticize. Choose your battles, agree to disagree, as I said before, and always try to, just make a person feel good. If the other person feels you're on the same team, one woman said, we never discussed, I never thought of divorcing my husband. Murdering him, yes. Divorce, no. Don't bring up divorce. Think positive. Think how we could go forward. Always add a little humor into your marriage. My parents' marriage really was based on laughter and humor and fun and good times, making each other laugh, making others laugh. That was the strength in their marriage. When you say that was one of your most strongest points.
Yeah, it was just a joke that my wife would marry me. Everybody said, how did she marry you? My father-in-law wouldn't, when I said I want to marry his daughter, he spent 6 hours walking me around the block where he lived and say, why don't you go back to school? I hadn't even graduated high school yet because I dropped out of school at 14. And he never thought he and my father were walking out of a wedding together, and I overheard them say, they just hope someday I'll be able to support my wife and a family. They didn't have a lot of great prospects for me, and I'll tell you the truth, I'd never let any of my daughters marry me. So, but all the things that you just said, those are things that should be taught, not aggressively, not just take exam about it, but inculcated,
Right.
taught by teachers, taught by...
Unfortunately, they're taught by marriage counselors after the marriages are always in trouble.
Yeah, and also some of the best advice that I got I received in this area is not from teachers and not from school, but from the songs that we sang in those days. One was, you got to accentuate the positive,
Right.
eliminate the negative, and don't mess with Mr. In Between. And then there was
Do
another
you want to
one.
hire him as a singer?
Don't.
Don't, right.
I get paid to keep quiet. And then what was another popular song? I don't want her, you could have her. She's too fat for me. She's too fat. She's too fat. She's too fat for me. I don't want her.
Okay.
And then during the Second World War, the
You're in the army, Mr.
no,
Jones.
the girls sang, or the guys sang, don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me, with anyone else but
Oh, no, he'd
me,
become a
with
singer.
anyone else but me. Don't sit under the apple tree with anyone else but me till I come marching home. So these are all interesting insights on how you should relate to a soulmate and a prospective lifelong connection.
So the goal is before you get married, get to know the person well. And after you get married, stop looking for problems and stop looking for criticism and look for a person's positives. You know,
And get your first divorce out of the way quickly. I got friends I got one friend that's been married 5 times. I got a bunch of friends that have been married 3 times. They trade in wives like they trade in their cars. As a matter of fact, one guy tells his friend, he says, "Oh, I just got a Mercedes for my wife," and the guy says, "Wow, that's a good trade." So if you could get a Mercedes, he meant to say, "I bought a Mercedes for my wife." He said, "I got a Mercedes for my wife." So the guy says, "Wow, that's a good deal. How do you do that?" He wanted to do the same thing. Anyway, we're hitting our full hour. It's been great being with you all. I hope you enjoyed some of it. I hope you tolerate the other part that you didn't like. And I hope you tune in again next week when we'll have some other controversial subject to talk with you about and things that are relevant to the current political scene, the current national behavior scene, anything that's timely and relevant. We'd love to discuss with you. Bring up anything you like, whether you agree with me or disagree. I learn more from the people that disagree with me because I think about it after the program's over, and I adopt some newer views, hopefully better views than I've been addicted to or I've adhered to for all these years. Anyway, as I say, I cherish you, my precious listeners. Have a great week. Have a great every day of your life. God bless you. I love you. Bye.
bye.